I got the record going. And then let me get the share screen up. And as always, let me know if you see it, if you can see the share screen.
Yeah.
Excellent. Let me get a slideshow. All right. So today's lesson is the Book of Esther explained. And the title of this lesson today is The Edict. So we're talking about the law that was enacted against the Jewish people within the story of Esther. Let me get my laser pointer. Yep, got my laser pointer. All right. So one of the themes of Esther that I've mentioned before was Esther is about law. That's one of the major themes. It's talking about the law and how the law was used badly and how the law was also used in a positive way. So the major conflict in Esther was simply a matter of law. The Jewish people were in danger because an unfavorable law was enacted against them. Haman, came up with a way to use the law of the Persians at that time uh, as his way to get revenge against Mordecai and against the Jewish people. So Haman was actually going to destroy the Jews by lawful means, according to their laws. What Haman was doing was more or less lawful. It was for his own gain. It was morally wrong, but it was lawful by their standards at that time. So when he plots this, he goes to the king. Everything about the process of Haman trying to destroy the Jews was done under legal pretext. He goes to the king. He says, "King, uh, these people are against you. Let's write a law to destroy them and attack them." The king says, "Okay." Now he did attempt to bribe the king because he said, "I'll give you money if you enact this law." And the king was like, "Keep the money." He said, "Go ahead and do what you want with these people." So uh, Haman had the permission of the king to do what he was going to do. They sent edicts out. They told all the people of their different nations within the empire. They said, on this day, you have the right to attack the Jews. And we're going to read that in a sec. Attack the Jews and plunder them. So we're going to do everything by the books, if you don't mind the expression. That Haman was doing everything lawfully. So the goal for today is to understand, you know, how did Esther save her people in spite of the law enacted against them? Because everything, like I was saying before, was lawful. Haman was attacking the Jews by lawful means. It wasn't a uh, something done in secret. It was something done openly with the king's permission. So how did Esther save her people in spite of that? That's the goal to understand today. And in a broader sense, to apply to us nowadays in Christianity, how is one saved if they're condemned to die by law? How are we saved even though we fall short of God's law and we are sinners and we're not worthy and we can't uphold the law? How are we still saved? Because the law is by lawful means, we all of us deserve death. So that's the goal to understand. We're going to understand what it means to be Christian, how we're saved, even though we break the law all the time, but we're going to understand that through this interaction Esther has through saving her people. So that's what we're going to see today. So let's go to the edict. What did the edict say? Let's go to Esther chapter 3, verse 12 through 15. Esther chapter 3, verse 12 through 15. And I'm reading the NIV version. And it reads, "Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the scripts of each province and in the language of each people all Haman's orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of the various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own ring. Dispatches were sent by couriers to all the king provinces with the orders to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as every law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality so that they'll be ready for that day. The couriers went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered. So essentially, in summary, the edict that Haman put out, it gave anybody of any other nationality, it gave them the right to attack the Jews. This is not just the men, but the women, the children, young or old. It didn't matter. They had the right to kill them and to take away their goods and plunder their goods. So it gave anybody of any nationality, anybody within the empire to allow them to attack the Jewish population. And like I said, they had the right to murder the Jews and plunder their goods. And it was only for one day, but you can do a lot of damage in one day. But they had the right to do that to the Jews, pretty much exterminate their entire population in a single day. Now, to give you the scale of this, to kind of give it, put it in perspective, the Jews that they had the right to attack wasn't just in Shusha. The story is taking place in Shusha, the palace here, but they had the right to attack Jews of pretty much of any province of the empire. So this is the extent of the Persian Empire, I believe, at its height. So more or less, it looked like this during Esther's time. And if you're a Jew living, let's say, over here in Jerusalem, you could be attacked. If you're a Jew living in Egypt, you could be attacked. If you were a Jew living in Asia Minor, you could be attacked. So this was meant to attack all the Jewish people across all their territories. It wasn't just in that particular city. It was all over the entire Persian Empire. Now, in order to understand this, also to put another perspective to you, something you got to know about Persian law from the way the Bible describes it is that the Persian law, once it was enacted, could not be overturned. All the Persian laws that came from the ruler were more or less permanent. To give you an example, let's read Daniel chapter 6, verse 8, and I have it here on the screen. Daniel chapter 6, verse 8. Now your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance with the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be repealed. So the Bible says earlier in Daniel, in the story of Daniel taking place earlier than the book of Esther, it talks about that the Persians and the Medes had laws where you could not repeal it. Once it's been put in writing, once the decree is issued from the king, it couldn't be altered. It was a permanent law. And Esther kind of confirms that rule was still in place during the story of Esther. Let's go to Esther chapter 8, verse 8. And it reads, now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews as it seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring, for no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. So the book of Esther also confirms that, the Persians, when they made a law, they could not repeal it. The king, they had to stand. The law does stand. So, and we don't know why they had that rule. We just know that that is the theme that the Bible tells us that. I have speculation on why it says that, why it couldn't be repealed, but I don't want to go into it today, into my theories. But the narrative of the Bible paints is that once the king makes a decree, it can't be overturned. It's permanent. So something you got to understand about the Edict of Haman in this story is that the Edict of Haman was never actually eliminated. His edict, where you could go, where gave people the right to attack the Jews, to murder their population, young, old, man, woman, child, didn't matter. the right to plunder their goods. All of that was in place on that certain day. That was never overturned. That was in place the entire time. So when Esther went to beg the king for mercy, for help to save her people, she was not asking him to overturn the law. She was asking a way to work within the Persian Empire, within the law, to save her people so that they don't have to die. But nobody's actually overturning the Edict of Haman. They're just finding a countermeasure to go against that law, but they don't actually break that law. If you get what I'm saying, they don't actually. The law is still on the books; it's still there. So the countermeasure was essentially another edict. And let's read what that edict says. Esther chapter 8, verse 11 through 13. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate. Sorry, I can't even say the word. Destroy the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them, or their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this all in the provinces of King Xerxes, was in the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves of their enemies. So a new decree was created to allow the Jews to defend themselves. So Haman's law still stands, but the other edict says you don't have to lay down and just let them kill you. You can defend yourself. You can fight back. You have a fighting chance. So that's what the other edict did. And in Esther chapter 9, verse 1 through 4, this is exactly what happens. Let's read Esther chapter 9, verse 1 through 4. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities, all the provinces of King Xerxes, to attack those determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them, because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces and the satraps and the governors and the king's administrators helped the Jews, because the fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. So the countermeasure was another edict to allow the Jews to defend themselves, even though Haman's law was still in the books. People had the right to attack them, but the Jews had the right to defend themselves. And they were successful in doing that, and they avenged themselves of their enemies, and they were able to survive this ordeal for this certain day. So the question becomes, why is this important for us to know? Why is it so important for us to understand this matter of law in the book of Esther? It's for several reasons. First, Esther demonstrates the transition from the Old Testament to the New Testament, as we'll see in the Bible itself. Esther is the story shows how God had the old law in place and how the New Testament comes with the coming of Jesus. And I'm gonna show you in a second, why this connects. But it actually demonstrates that transition from the Old Testament to New Testament before it actually happens. Because the New Testament, as you may already know, does not destroy the Old Testament. The New Testament is a continuation of the Old Testament, but with more clarification. So just like how Haman's edict was never overturned, the Old Testament has never been overturned. God's law from the Old Testament is still the same as it is now. The principles are still there. It's just the New Testament builds upon those principles and brings more clarification. But I'm gonna lay that out as we go along with to understand, why Esther demonstrates this so perfectly. Let's go Matthew 5:17 through 18, and it is here on the screen, so you don't have to flip to it. But here it is, Matthew chapter 5:17 through 18. And this is Jesus speaking. Do not think I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. So if you look at Jesus's ministry, Jesus makes it clear that he is not changing the old law technically, or he's not overturning it. He's not abolishing anything that came before him. He's just coming to fulfill them, right? He is bringing essentially another edict. He is bringing more clarifications on top of it, but the principles are still the same, right? So just like the laws of the Persians, as we see in the story of Esther, God is also unchanging, right? It's the same principle. The Old Testament, the God of the Old Testament is still the same God of the New Testament. He has not changed. His principles have not changed. It never changed. His law still stands, just like it was for the Persians in the story of Esther, how their law always stood. Haman's edict was never overturned. However, let's read John chapter 3, 16 through 18. John chapter 3, 16 through 18. And let me flip there myself. Here we go. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. So essentially what Jesus is Jesus is God's countermeasure to our sins. He's essentially another edict, just like in the story of Esther, because Jesus is not destroying God's old law. The principles of the Old Testament, the 10 Commandments, everything God said in the Old Testament, it still stands. But Jesus allows us to have a fighting chance within that law, so we don't necessarily, when we break the law, it doesn't result in our death. If you get what I'm saying, there, he's another edict. So, but that's why it says in John 3 and then verse 18, it says whoever believes in him is not condemned, right? We are not condemned by law if we believe in Jesus Christ. But it says, however, who does not believe in him is already condemned, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. So by nature, we are actually condemned by God's law. But if we believe in Jesus, we're not condemned anymore. But if you don't believe in Jesus, you're still condemned by that old law, if that makes sense, because the law never changed. It still stands. Just like Haman's edict still stands in the book of Esther, God's law is still standing now. It's just Jesus is that countermeasure. He's that other edict that allows us to have a fighting chance. So we're not, we don't have to, it doesn't result in our death. So that is what Jesus is. That's why God sent Jesus. He is our countermeasure to that old law. Now, how does he save us under the law? Exactly. Why is he a countermeasure? What does he do that gives us a chance? Let's go to Romans chapter 3, verse 21 through 26. Okay, let me flip there myself. Here we go. All right. Romans chapter 3, verse 21 through 26. But now, apart from the law, the righteousness of God has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. This righteousness is given through faith in Jesus Christ to all who believe. There's no difference between Jew or Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, and all are justified freely by his grace through the redemption that came by Christ Jesus. God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. He did this to demonstrate his righteousness because in his forbearance, he had left the sins committed beforehand unpunished. He did it to demonstrate his righteousness at the present time, so just as we so as to be just and the one who justifies those who have faith in Jesus. So the way Jesus saves us, the reason why he's a countermeasure is because he is and as you read throughout the Bible, Jesus is a mediator, right? He is a person who communicates with God on our behalf. He's like a good lawyer, right? You know, you could have a legal issue in our court system, and then when you go to court, you have what? You have a lawyer, you have somebody that represents you, somebody that knows the judge, somebody that can present the case before the judge on your behalf, so that you're not punished by whatever law or whatever issue you have, right? That's what Jesus does, right? He is a mediator. He is a person that he's the go in between us and between God. Just like Esther was kind of a go between the Jewish people, her people, and her husband, the king of the Persians, because she was the queen. She knew the king. She had influence on him. She could talk to the king on the rest of the Jewish people's behalf. So she was acting as a mediator in that situation. And Jesus is our mediator. He's the go-between between us and between God. Jesus is also a lawgiver, right? He's fulfilling the old law. He's bringing another edict. He's giving us more clarification to what God had already said before. And most importantly, he is a sacrifice, because to make things right with God, it requires the shedding of blood, right? All sin requires a sacrifice to cleanse that sin, and Jesus is the ultimate sacrifice. So this is why Jesus is the perfect countermeasure for the law that is for God's standard, because we all fall short of that. We're condemned by law, but belief in Jesus saves us from that death or from that punishment we would normally have under law. So our faith gives us a fighting chance. Just like Esther with the other edict was able to give the Jewish people a fighting chance, Jesus is giving our faith in Jesus is what gives us a fighting chance for us to be saved. And then we can all continue living just like the Jewish people were saved and were able to continue living. We can also continue living with Christ after our physical death. We can be with God forever and live happily in that of that existence for forever afterwards. So that is why the book of Esther, is so important, because it literally lays out God's plan for us that he was going to have for us when he brought Jesus. It is happening before. God is using this story to show, like, this is what's happening in Esther, but this is what I'm going to do later. And Esther displays that perfectly without even saying it. It's very subtle, but Esther is really displaying that before it even happened. And God does this throughout the whole Old Testament. That's why it's so important to read the Old Testament, because God has given clues the entire time. He's been giving examples the entire time in the Old Testament that doesn't that we can't realize until we get to the New Testament. But it's there the entire time. And I think Esther is a perfect example of that, even though it doesn't say it outright. It's very subtle, but it definitely belongs in the Bible. It definitely shows what God was going to do. So but that's all I had, and I hope everybody sees that when they read the book of Esther. But any comments or any questions before we close out? All right. Well, we'll end it there.